Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adrienne Davis, and I am a financial planner here at Zenith Wealth Partners. And I'm here with Lawanda. She is one of our wonderful clients, but as you all can see, is she is adding value today with a very important topic, taking time when you need it, especially as it relates to medical leave. In my experience, we have a lot of clients who have experienced burnout simply due to being in the rat race or being in corporate America. And a lot of times people do not understand the options that they have available to them to be able to take a reprieve from their current career. I personally did a sabbatical about 8 years ago, and it took time because I felt burnout from work. Lawanda has had experience in aligned with her methodology. She's been a consultant for multiple people who have also needed to take medical leave. And so when we were brainstorming in a recent client meeting, we thought it would be a wonderful opportunity for Lawanda to come share her expertise as it related to this topic. So we're really excited to welcome her and really excited for everyone to be on the call. And we did want to make this an engaging session. So if you have any comments or questions as we go through these slides in this presentation, we encourage you to say something in the chat so that we could address it. And Sarah will send these slides after we get off this call as well, so that you're able to refer to it or send it to people that you think may also benefit from having this information. Okay, perfect. So we'll kick it off with introductions actually. So I mentioned briefly that I'm a financial planner here at Zenith Wealth Partners. We are a minority owned fee only RIA headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are fee only, and I believe we work with clients across the United States. We really like to emphasize comprehensive financial planning. And my background is that I started in public accounting, hence why I have my CPA. I did taxes for high net worth individuals, partnerships, closely held corporations, and then I transitioned over to financial services where I got my CFP, and now I work with a lot of wonderful clients, helping them to build and accumulate wealth, as well as have confidence as it relates to their financial wellness. All right, and Lawanda, I'll kick things over to you.
Yes, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Adrienne. Just want to say thanks to Zenith for creating this space. Um, you know, no one's paying me to say this, but you all are wonderful, truly. Adrienne, you're a dream to work with, and you really helped just change the entire energy and path of me and my husband's financial planning, and we really appreciate that. So, thank you all again for your commitment. So just a little bit about what we're going to be doing today, what we're talking about. We will first talk about why medical leave, what is it, what types of medical leave are there, maybe some potential reasons why people go out on medical leave before talking about how to pre-plan for going on medical leave. What is the actual process? How do you do it? What is all the paperwork about? And then we'll kind of shift gears a little bit, talk about what it's like to be on medical leave a little bit and what comes after it before we open it up to create some time for questions, do a recap, and close it out. I'm pretty interruptible, so if you want to ask a question anytime, feel free to drop it in the chat. I think you can come off mute. Just it's fine, totally fine. Interrupt me, and I'm really good at course correcting if we start taking too much time. So feel very much so inclined to ask questions or just drop it in the chat as well. So a little bit about me. My name is Lawanda, as Adrienne mentioned. I would describe myself as an industry agnostic venture builder. I've had a 2 decades long career. I started early, so I look so young because I am. And I went on to build some really, I went to some really solid schools. I went on to build some really amazing businesses. I've worked a lot of jobs, as you can see here, partnered with a lot of different companies on those jobs, got a few awards along the way. I'm really grateful for all of those opportunities. And in those various roles, I really helped grow a lot of businesses, but not only the business people that I worked with. So it was very natural for me to make my way to both consulting and then coaching. One of the most important things that I lend my clients is my life experience. And so the person who had all these roles and all these great companies and schools is the same person who had to go on an 8-month medical leave, which is no small period of time, right? So what I'm sharing with you today is the information that I wish that I knew then. It's really my privilege to be able to share that experience with people now. So that's what I'm giving you today. Hopefully you get something out of it. And you never know when you need this information. So I always say, just like visiting a doctor or a lawyer, the first time you go in there, you don't want it to be the time that you meet them to save you. So it's good to have the information in advance, before you might ever need it in your life, or you might need to share it with someone else as well. So we'll just point that out. I am really big on mindset shift. So just really want us to think about, um, why is it that we tend to, you know, burn out here in this country? Most think people are from the United States. And so I found this really great quote, from a book called This Here Flesh by an author named Cole Arthur Riley. And she's kind of paraphrasing or quoting Trisha Hersey, another artist, activist, and theologian. So it says, the idea that your body doesn't belong to you, that you're simply a tool for production, is a violence embedded in the system that we've come to accept, celebrate, and even reward. And now we demand that same violence from one another. We're in awe of that violence, right? That violence it is that our entire personhood is just for production. I'm here to tell you it is not. It is completely fine, expected, and self-preserving to take time off when you need it. And I just want to flip that notion on its head today. There are so many people that even really need medical leave. I think something like nearly 50% of workers need medical leave, and they didn't take it, right? Mostly due to cost. So it was really, I think, a great opportunity for myself and Zenith to come together today and talk about this, because there are, as I've learned, a lot of different options of how to make your finances work for different situations that you're in. So that is what I wanted to start with. Um, and with that, we'll jump right in. So, what is leave? Leave is officially approved time away from work, typically granted by your employer, during which you retain your employment status. That's the most important part. You're not fired, you're not quitting, you're not on vacation. It's a pause, not an end. And depending on what type of leave, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper later, it could be paid, it could be unpaid, and again, hopefully it's job protected, 'cause that's usually what it means. But what are some different types of leave? So with the different types, there's parental leave, which I think that we're mostly familiar with. So folks are having kids either through adoption or birth. Time off is needed to not only, take care of themselves, but also to bond with the child. Family leave can sometimes be related to that. But family leave can also be to do caregiver responsibilities, not just to a child, but a sick family member. For example, aging parents. And then bereavement leave is exactly what it sounds like. So usually there is some sort of loss in your family, and you need time off to grieve. Then we have administrative leave. That's not the positive kind, where there's some sort of investigation going on, and you're taking time off of work. There's a sabbatical, which Adrienne mentioned. Some companies even have it built in where if you have been there for so many years, you automatically get so many months off, every so often, to kind of just take time and space to do volunteer work. Relax your brain and body, think about what it is you want to do next. And then, of course, talking today about medical leave. So, medical leave is really about time off for your own personal condition, usually a serious health condition. It can be under FMLA, which is Family and Medical Leave Act. I'll talk a little bit more about what these are later, so I'm just going to breeze through them now. But just know there's different options, right? It can also be under ADA, the American Disabilities Act, and then it can also be under your employer policy. So, like I mentioned, for sabbatical, sometimes employers actually have policies built in that allow you to take time off. So, again, depending on what the company policy is and what your benefits are, and I'll just name here that benefits are separate from the mechanism through which you take leave, right? So, depending on the policy and the benefits, it may or may not be job protected, and it may or may not be paid. Um, what are some reasons why people go on medical leave? So, recovery from a physical or mental health issue. This includes things like chronic health issues, substance use disorders, personal trauma or grief that's really affecting your health. Um, Burnout, we talked a little bit about, mental health crises. Um, and often, sometimes you need to go on leave for these reasons in order to think about how you're going to make a career transition to get that's part of your healing, right? So it is a good idea if you're experiencing any of these things to really reevaluate if your career or the job or the employer that you're currently at is maybe a cause of those. And that might be one of the changes you need to make in your life as part of your treatment plan. One thing that I'll just really name here because it was my personal experience and it took me a long time to realize what was happening to me. Sometimes we ignore all of the things that point to a serious medical issue, right? So, burnout stress is a serious medical issue. Um, I don't have to be a doctor to tell you that stress can kill you. It almost killed me. And it really is, oftentimes there are a lot of clues before you get to the point where your body just can't take it anymore. So if you're having unexplained headaches all the time, or an upset stomach, or heartburn, or these things, unexplained pain all over your body, you've gone to the doctor and they said you seem fine. Um, it usually points to a larger issue, and we just go on ignoring those things, even like unexplained rashes. Like there's no reason for these symptoms that are coming, and sometimes we need to dig in deeper on the mental health side in order to uncover what is really going on and what we need to do, that our bodies are begging us to do. So I'll just point that out. That was my experience, and it took my best friend coming to my house and telling me, "Are you going to let these people kill you?" And I was like, "Oh wow." I didn't, because I was like, "I don't know why I don't feel good." And he could just see it so clearly, and so sometimes it takes people that we love getting in our face a little bit about what the problem might be. So how do you make sure that you're prepared before you do it? Which is, I think, is a big thing around financial planning, is right, preparing in advance for the future. And so very similarly, we want to prepare for when we're considering or not sure if we should take leave, start that preparation process at that point. So I like to break everything down into formulas and methods. And so the pre-planning is really a three-step process, the first of which is really to establish care. So like I said, if perhaps you're having unexplained symptoms, or perhaps you already have a chronic health issue and it's flaring up, if you're not already under the care of a treating provider, get one, seek active care, go regularly. It can even be your primary care physician. So maybe start going to the doctor around that. Um, as you're seeking that care, start to discuss with your medical provider what are some of the limitations you're experiencing around work. How is it impacting your ability to work or just function on a daily basis? It doesn't have to be necessarily work limiting. You want to document the condition. So for me, mine was musculoskeletal, right? So I couldn't stand, sit, walk, lie down without pain, right? And it was a big problem. So initially, I started with an accommodation. I asked them to get me a standing desk, right? Because sitting was very difficult. Um, and then I asked if I could work from home 2 days a week, just like on a consistent basis. Because we had a very like lenient work from home policy. So it was more of kind of like a notification of like, I'm going to be working from home as a part of this accommodation. So start to maybe, submit some of those accommodation paperworks if it's actually impacting your work on a daily basis. And like I said, start that paperwork as early as you can, right? Second piece around preparation is knowing your options. So there are different modalities to take leave through. Sometimes it's that company policy, like I mentioned, FMLA or ADA, which again, I'll explain in more in depth in just one moment. But know what those options are. Go look in your employee handbook and see what the policies on leave are. Go look through your benefits, right? And see if you actually have short-term disability insurance. A lot of companies, it's just a line item when you're checking off your benefits, and some automatically check that one in particular because it's so low cost, the company automatically pays for it. So it's like often $2 or $3, out of your check, right? So, or if the company pays for it, it's on their end. So you don't even realize sometimes you have these coverages because it's inherent to a lot of benefits policies. Contact professionals. So if there is, if you have questions about those policies, if you have questions about your benefits and your insurance coverage, call the insurance company and ask them, what does this mean? How does it work? It's kind of this process of like doing your research, right? And using those professionals as really a resource. Find out if your job will be protected under these different policies. So sometimes your company policy doesn't necessarily protect your job, right? Where FMLA and ADA both do protect your job. Um, Find out if you'll be paid, Like if you have the benefits that will pay you, great. If the company policy allows for payment, great. If they don't, then you'll have to figure that out on the financial planning side, right? And that's where we talk about preparing the finances. So think about what your goal is for medical leave. Um, I think that if you say, okay, I need to get better, but also decide if this job is where you need to stay as a part of your ongoing treatment and care, right? So if it's not, then think about if my goal is to leave, what things do I need to have in order at the end of this time period in order to do that? Again, that goes right into this preparing for finances thing, right? So before you, hopefully before, because sometimes, unfortunately, medical leave is an emergency. So this is where I go back to not ignoring the signs in advance, right? But sometimes if you can plan ahead, then really starting to save up your money, understand your income, all your sources of income, and maybe if you, uh, know right now you're kind of balling out and spending all your money, maybe you need to revise your budget, right? Which Adrian helps us do often. So think about how you're currently spending and how that might be impacting your savings or your ability to save up in order to plan to take that medical leave. And then, of course, identify any reductions in expenses that you can make and implement those changes. So sometimes it's going through and canceling all of those subscriptions, as a way to just save a few extra dollars. Sometimes it is automatically having savings come out of your check, and go to a savings account. So you don't even have to think about it. There are a lot of ways you can implement these changes as kind of, a built-in way to prepare financially. So, let's see. Is there any, yeah, I was gonna say, are there any questions? I have one question. Feel free to come off mute.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this call. First and foremost, I think that this topic is so important. And my question is really around the reasons people take leave. So you mentioned some of the unexplained health issues could be an indication for you as a person to be aware of, oh, maybe I
Mhm.
need to take some time off to for healing, right? um I guess my question is, if you can share a little bit more about how as an individual you can make the connection between, especially if it's like a chronic health thing, or like you said,
Mhm.
unexplained. You don't really know what's the purpose of this. Is this because of my job? Would taking time off be the thing that helps correct this issue? I don't know. So I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit more about how to make the connection between your job and
Yeah.
whatever health issue you may be experiencing.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's two ways. I think one is you know, your personal realization, that connection. I think one is how you communicate out to your healthcare providers. So I think personally, if you are going to work. So I think what happened for me personally was I was like, oh, it's a stressful week. And then I'd be, it's a stressful month or stressful season, or is it the time of the year we do this thing, and then I realized when that time was over, I was still feeling bad. Right. So I think that's a big clue. Also, I do firmly believe, I think in the US we talk about like dream job, and you love your job so much, or you love what you do so much, it's not work to you. And I do think that that kind of elicits a bit of a fantasy around work. It is not everyone's labor is not everyone's dream, right? So I think that that is also important to acknowledge. However, it doesn't mean you should be dreading going to a place. We're talking about anxiety to show up to work, anxiety to open an email, to go into meetings with certain people. Those things are not normal, right? And so for me, I was associating some of that with, oh, it's a busy time, or, I just need a week's rest, and I would take a week off. I'd take 2 weeks off, and I come back and it'd be the same thing. And so I think that's where you're like, okay, I'm burnt out. I need to go talk to a psychologist. I need to go talk to my primary healthcare provider. Another thing is like your sleep is being interrupted, right? Again, it's really easy to say, oh, it's just a hard week or a hard month, or in the financial space, it's tax season, all of those sorts of things. But when they start impacting your health, it's a little too far. So how can we course correct for that? I think that's part of making the connection for yourself. And then when you are talking to your healthcare provider, I think you don't have to come all in with that at once unless you're in that situation. For me, I was like in that situation. Um, but if you are just starting out, establishing care, then it's like, here's what I've been experiencing. They'll usually have you try a few things. That's Western medicine. Let's, give you this medication. Let's send you to physical therapy. Let's do this. Maybe you need to go to a therapist, right? Maybe your primary care says you need to go to a therapist, right? Maybe they'll give you some sleeping pills. And then you're coming back and you're saying, I'm still experiencing this. I still have anxiety around work. I'm still, not sleeping well. I'm still not eating well. Some people it impacts their eating. Then I think that's where you're starting to say, this seems like it's a pattern that might be connected to my work. And I think maybe I'm experiencing burnout. And I'm sure they'll have a series of questions to help identify that as well. So I think just kind of that's why I encourage people to start early and establish care early. And really just, I think part of that's like taking good care of your health. It's not like brushing aside these symptoms, but it's like if you're experiencing something that you don't normally experience, go to the doctor, you know? So that's where I would say with that. Hopefully it's helpful.
And I wanted to loop in briefly, since I know, Luana, you gave an excellent answer. My experience when I had burnout in the workplace, when I was on my way to work, I didn't have any physical ailments, but I was crying on my way to work, or I feel like I exhibited symptoms of depression where I got out of bed at the latest possible that I could still make it to work on time, or as soon as I got home from work, I'm going straight to bed. So I didn't have any physical ailments, but even friends and family notice, hey, you're retracting a bit as far as your social life. And so those things were, and that's what my experience was when I had that burnout. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I think if people start noticing things, definitely listen. I think oftentimes we like to ignore it, but if people around you are like, hey, what's going on with you? And more than one person says it, or someone brings to you more than one time, definitely something to look more into. Okay, I'm gonna move right along. So I promised that I would talk a little bit more about what each type of leave really is. There are multiple and often overlapping systems that you can use to take medical leave. So it's really important to understand what they are, how they interact, so you can assess the time, level of job protection and support you need to actually go through this. Again, I'll just call attention to the mechanism through which you get paid is often separate from this. So right now we're talking about the mechanism through which you take leave. So with company policy, this is really where your company has a handbook. They have all of their policies in it, hopefully. And so the pay could be a part of that policy. It could also not be, right? But your job will usually have different types of time off listed in a handbook. It might be under PTO. They might have vacation. They might have, sick leave. But sometimes there are other types of leave that companies allow for, and you'll see those usually in that kind of same section, right? So um, this is where, depending on your company, I worked in tech for a long time. I still kind of work in tech. I suppose I do a lot of consulting in tech. Oftentimes companies will offer more than what is legally required. So this is where you'll have companies that every once in a while, they will offer pay as a part of a medical leave they actually list out in their handbook, right? Often, again, it includes various types of PTO. So that's where you have the companies defining what it is they allow for and what they will do as a part of their regular employee benefits. Then you have Family and Medical Leave Act, so it's FMLA for short. I think this passed in like 1993, maybe. And so you have it allows for 12 weeks per year of unpaid job protected leave. FMLA really truly is a job protection mechanism, right? So um, this is where, again, they have eligibility requirements. So over a period of 12 months, you have to have worked a certain number of hours. I wouldn't get too hung up on that. You just need to look it up and see if you fit those eligibility requirements. And again, this was really designed initially to cover serious health conditions, things like caregiving, birth, adoption. And again, I will just note that it is for companies that employ 50 or more people. Um, I also will say if you work for a public agency, like a government agency or a local educational agency, like public or private schools, there are different rules. So, for example, the number of employees goes away. So all public agencies, educational organizations have to provide the 12-week thing that's covered by FMLA, not, just they have 50 employees or more. So kind of some similarities between those two are that, the FMLA gets enacted or put into, starts rolling through the HR process. So usually HR will deal with that with you. It's a very like legally regulated process. So they're really trained to do it. So this is not something that you necessarily need to go to your supervisor, immediately. I would start with HR, especially if you feel that you work in a um, hostile environment. Because for a lot of people, that is the case, right? And you cannot talk to your boss about these things, and you feel that your job is going to be, there'd be retaliation against you in your job. So definitely starting with HR because there are rules around um, protecting people. Even you don't even have to take the leave. If you send an email to HR saying I'm considering this or I want more information, it kind of puts you into this protected class of like they can't eliminate your job, because you said I want to take leave, which is a part of FMLA. Um,
So,
again, go ahead.
Luana, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
When you're going to HR and you are considering taking leave through FMLA or something like that, how much do you actually have to share with them?
that's a great question. You don't have to share anything with them. You might say, it's impacting my health. I have something that's impacting my health, a serious condition. And even if they press you, what's wrong with you? What do you need? All these things, how can you help? It's in a hostile work environment when I first took medical leave. This was a very long time ago. So it was 2017. Um, and I'd already had some issues with my company around, they wouldn't give me a raise that I had been promised before, all these types of things. And it was like dealing with HR. We had a new HR director, and they were coming through and putting a whole bunch of new policies, right? And so I felt very much so, I was very careful about everything that I said, right? And I generally encourage people to be very careful about things they say. You have no obligation to like spell out what your health issue is, right? You don't ever have to mention what your health issue is to your supervisor. Where it comes in is like on the paperwork, and that's really your doctor filling it out. And that paperwork HR will see eventually. It's usually like certain people in HR will see it, and it has to be then submitted, right? And what happens from there is even HR is not allowed to go and tell your supervisor, oh, these are all the ways that they're sick and things that are impacted. They can't do that either. So it's very much again a protected type of situation where if you're considering taking a different type of leave, which I'll get into earlier, you might have to say a little bit more, but this is definitely a place where um I would just you want to say nothing, right? But you want to be clear and concise. I think that's really what I'll convey there. Hopefully, that answered the question, Adrian.
Yeah, and I know we have a couple of other questions. So the first one is, do you have any language you'd recommend where you don't trust your HR representative?
Oh yeah, that was me. So I'm gonna get into this a little bit later, but if you really feel that something bad might happen to you, like losing your job or them not giving you the benefits that you're been promised, I personally went to see a lawyer before I even got too deep into this. Again, just like a doctor, you don't do the first time you walk into their office, a time where you need them to save you. So I felt like I want to make this contact before. In terms of language, um, I had already been using the accommodation, like I mentioned, at the standing desk, and I was doing 2 days a week from work. So I think that there was like an understanding, even though they didn't like have my full on medical history, is understanding that I'm having like mobility issues, right? And so then when I went into HR, I just said, my health has gotten to a point where it's impacting my work, and I need to take leave or consider leave options. Can you please give me more information? Just left it at that. Right. Even at that point, I didn't say, oh, it's, I can't do this thing or I can't do that thing. I was just like, this is the situation. And I need to get more information. So I think that's where I would start. Um, and again, if people press you, it's okay to just say, that's what I'm comfortable sharing. It's your health and it's private. So um, that's what I would say. Is there another question, Adrian?
Yes. The second question is, can burnout be covered under FMLA? Does a therapist need to recommend?
Yes. So burnout can definitely be covered under FMLA. Um, High stress that causes, like Adrian mentioned, like symptoms of depression or similar things, that is a serious medical condition. So FMLA covers both physical and mental health related issues. And again, it's considered a serious medical issue. So definitely yes. Um, Initially, so before I got really sick, so this dragged on for a really long time where I was having all these like unexplained symptoms, right? And I also had a chronic health issue. So I know, part of the chronic health thing, usually if for example, I have an autoimmune disorder, it is a known scientific fact that stress is bad for autoimmune disorders, right? Like this is a fact. And I was under a really high stress environment. And I was getting sicker and sicker little by little, or having these unexplained episodes. But initially, it was more mental health related. So I was just like so tired, and I was not wanting to go in and all of these things. And so I would start talking to a friend, and they were like, "You should just, go to a psychologist and talk to them about this." So it can be recommended through a therapist. That is definitely a way to do it, and it does fall under a serious health condition.
And if someone doesn't have a therapist, would they go to a primary care provider, or how would they maneuver?
Yeah, I would go to a primary health provider. Typically, I consider the primary health care provider as like a quarterback, right? So they're going to take care of all of your general stuff, things that are impacting you on a daily basis. And if they get to the point where they're like, you need to see a specialist, they'll let you know that. Right. So I would definitely start there if you don't have a therapist, or if you don't have mental health care as part of your benefits, definitely start with your primary care provider. Now, it's different than what was happening with me when I was on medical leave. I have one medical. And so one medical, and a lot of these doctors, a lot of these like medical healthcare networks, they have like programs. So One Medical actually does like group programs around mental health care. So you can go to these webinars, and they'll talk to you about, how to manage stress. What are some actual tactics, that you can use to manage stress? And it's like a 6-part series, things like that. So one big thing for me, because I had another episode of burnout. The actually was actually my physical health. This one was like burnout. So I did the 6-week program, and they were talking about like breathing exercises. And I raised my hand and I said, but is it normal that, okay, you have, a tough meeting or something is triggering to you, and you do the breathing exercise? I said, but I can't get through the day or every meeting. I can't go 2 meetings or 3 meetings like, oh, I need to take a deep breath or I need to go lay down. And I'm like, I've been doing all of these things. That's another sign that you need to seek care. So they actually told me as a part of that session, hey, you need to go to a specialist, right? And have a serious conversation about that. Because if you're not able to manage with normal coping mechanisms, and that's another thing, that's a serious issue with your health, right? So that's what I'll say about that.
All right. And then Lawanda, we do have one more question, but I'm not sure if you'll address this within the presentation. But when we're thinking about the different leave options, do we need to ask for a certain length of time with our primary care provider or psychologist?
Yes, I will definitely address that. Let me go through the rest of this part, and then if I haven't addressed it, just ping me again.
Okay.
So I want to touch on the other type of leave, which is, it's actually not a type of leave. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA for short, is really about protecting people that have physical or mental disabilities. They can be temporary or long term, um, protecting them in general, right? So a part of that law um, is around accommodation. So this law is really accommodation focused. So again, it's a mechanism through which you say that the accommodation that I need in this moment is to take time off of work, right? And again, this is unpaid. Um, it can be extended leave all at one time or intermittent. Actually, both FMLA and ADA allow for you to take like bursts of time off. Um, if you need. So I think for folks who've had kids, sometimes you know that you have the 12 weeks, but you don't have to take it all at once. So that is an option. If you're having a serious medical condition, I encourage people to take an extended period of time off and allow your body and your mind the time and space to fully heal. But this is the mechanism through which leave is one type of accommodation. Again, there are all types of regulations for these things. For ADA, I think companies that have more than 15 employees need to provide a reasonable accommodation. The idea here is um, it can't cause hardship or undue hardship on the company. Um, that's where interpretation comes into play. So again, if you feel like your rights are not being respected, I definitely encourage people to just like have a consultation with a lawyer and get their opinion on that, and just think about how you move. But once you start even sending emails again about these things to HR, it really kind of changes the tone of the conversation because there are so many regulations around them. So one thing I will say around the timing is that you can when you go to the doctor, they'll ask you, oftentimes it depends on the doctor you have, they'll ask you how much time do you think you need off. I encourage people to always start with 3 months. So I wouldn't be like, I need 2 weeks off, right? Because at the end of the 2 weeks, you're going to have to go have another back and forth about extending the leave, right? Um, I'll get into it when we talk about the process. There's a lot of paperwork around these things, definitely FMLA and ADA. Sometimes the company policy requires paperwork as well. And so you want to minimize that as much as possible because it also is stressful. So if you're actually, again, having these medical issues, stress induces these things, right? So the more you have to do back and forth, the more you have to fill out more paperwork. There's often delays with these things. There's often a refill this out because we made a mistake. You want to eliminate that. So I always say, don't go in there begging for 2 weeks. Just say, I just need 3 months. You're not asking anyone to give you anything that's not due to you. Again, going back to that mindset shift of like, your body is not just a tool for production. You need to, just like a car, it has to be regular maintenance and taking care of it, right? And really having care with your body and your mind. And so, this is something that is enabling you to do that when you haven't been doing it or not been able to do it the way that it needs to be on a regular basis. So don't go in there asking for crumbs, right? Just say, I need the 3 months. I coach everyone just to start with 3 months. And I will tell you this, if you're talking to a doctor and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that, or I don't know, because everyone's not familiar with these processes. So sometimes the doctor's office will tell you, oh, I'm not comfortable filling out the paperwork because I don't know about it. It's totally fine. Go get another doctor, right? Or go back to your primary care doctor. Um, because you're not scamming anyone. You know what I mean? Like, this is not, but some doctors just are not equipped, or don't have the expertise to fill these things out. And sometimes if you're going to like a small private office, they just don't feel like they have enough like legal protection and all those things to be able to handle that. And that's totally fine. Just go to a different provider. Um, so hopefully that answers the question around time period as well. There is a bit around like converting leave from short term to long term. I'll just quickly say that usually short term leave is like up to 6 months. It depends on the policies, but usually it's like up to 6 months. It starts with 3 months. Some people it's up to 3 months, right? Some companies. Um, but then at the 6 month period, it can be converted to a long term leave. And that was my experience because I was on leave for 8 months. All right. So again, there's quite a bit of overlap in some of these. Oftentimes, if you look at like FMLA and ADA, FMLA has a 12-week end and ADA can be used to extend, right? Because ADA is an accommodation, so it's a little bit separate. So if you run out of the leave under FMLA, the job protection, you could say, okay, I want to extend it using ADA and go through that with a company. Both of those, of course, require medical documentation, but that doesn't mean you have to discuss your limitations and your health issues with people at length in your company. So you'll have to have the doctor fill out those papers and sign them, um, and you'll fill out a part of them as well. And so that's just a part of it. The best scenario is, the more robust scenario is you have the legal protections under FMLA or ADA, and then you have income support, through your company, and then workplace accommodations through ADA, right? So that's like the best of all three worlds, but sometimes that's not able to happen. All right, so a little bit about the process. We will be sharing out this information, so I'm going to go quickly, but again, feel free to ask questions if anything is unclear. We already talked a little bit about pre-planning. So this is again you establishing care, maybe proactively asking for some accommodations, doing a bit of research to understand your options, and starting to prepare your finances, shoring up savings, revisiting your budget and expenses, implementing any changes that you need to. The next phase after that, this is where we start to make some decisions, right? So make some decisions about what mechanisms you're going to use to make leave possible. The first one is determining that leave modality that we just did all the talking about, right? So your company policy, FMLA, ADA, or some combination of those things. And this is where, hopefully in your research, you've checked your eligibility. And so you're going to make a decision about what modalities you're going to use to execute the actual leave. Then you want to decide on the mechanism through which you'll be paid. So if you'll be paid, right? So step three is really clarifying that plan, right? And this could include your normal paycheck, because some company policies say you'll continue to be paid through leave. That's great. If you have a company policy that says that, do that, right? But sometimes the pay mechanism is going to be through um, short-term disability insurance, state disability insurance. There's a lot of acronyms here, so just rock with it. If you have any questions, let me know. Often states have disability insurance programs as well. So it's another mechanism to see if you are qualified to get pay through while you're out. Sometimes it's going to have to be through savings, right? So this is why it's important to shore up those savings. It's also important to shore up those savings because a part of short-term or long-term disability insurance is it's not 100% of your income. So short-term and long-term disability insurance are often known as paycheck insurance. So again, this is a pay mechanism, but it's oftentimes like 60%, 60-70% of your income. And then they might ask you to go and apply for state benefits as well, and that might get you up to like 80%, maybe. It depends on how your state works. So it's really important to have the savings, even if you do have another pay mechanism, because it's hard for me, I don't know about y'all, it's hard to cut down 20 or 30% of your expenses, right? It's not an easy feat. But doesn't mean you shouldn't do it because you still need the time off. So that is one thing. Or sometimes it's a loan from yourself, right? Maybe it's through your investments that you have, and thinking how to move money around in order to make this possible for a finite period of time, right? You'll be able to replenish those things in the future, but just thinking about what's the best option for you to get the care that you need.
And can I interject briefly as well?
Absolutely.
So with short-term and long-term disability, I always encourage individuals to opt into that for open enrollment, even if you think you may not need it, because we never know what life will throw us. You could have a brain aneurysm, get in a car accident, have a depressive episode. So that's extremely important. But long-term disability is something that you can purchase outside of your employer. So generally what we see is that employers cover between 60, 67%. I don't really see 100% of their salary for long-term disability. So what you can do is go and get an outside policy to make up the gap. And
Yeah.
why that's important to do it earlier than later is they look at your medical history when they issue the long-term disability policy. So if you already have a history of, let's say, depression and anxiety, they may decline you for that disability insurance. So even if you don't think that you need it now, it's better to secure it before you actually need it. And generally, you want to make sure you're getting some own occupation coverage that says that if something happens and I'm not able to work, if I cannot do my specific job, then I need to get paid. Whereas they have modified own occupation
Hmm.
long-term disability where they say, okay, you can't do your job, but you can go do another job and they won't pay you your benefits. So that's something important to also think about.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point. I think part of the preparing your finances is hopefully, if if you don't have one and you're able to, I would highly recommend having a financial planner. A big part of that, they're not just going through your budget and your investments, but they're looking at all the holistic picture. And so part of that is sending all of your benefits policies so they can see like what assets do you have available to you and can be deployed through various mechanisms. And so I think that was a big part of preparing your finances as well. Is like we worked with a planner, and so we shared all of those things, right? And so they're able to say, like Adrienne said, she's able to make those recommendations just in general. And then when you need them, you'll have them. Sometimes also when you leave a company, different insurance carriers will allow you to maintain or retain that insurance policy. So I've had clients that they were at a company working, they had opted into a short-term disability policy, and when they left the company, they got communication from the insurance that said, "Hey, would you like to continue paying for this?" And again, these policies are usually not that expensive, in my experience. It depends, but they're usually not so expensive as like healthcare coverage. And so that client just, I don't even think at the time I was coaching them in general for career coaching and job search coaching, but they asked me about it and said, if it's only a few bucks, it's 20 bucks maybe, why not? Because it might be something you need to consider in the future. And then flash forward, 6 months, and they did need to take short-term disability. And so they had a short-term disability policy at their current employer that they used to cover some of the paycheck, and then they could overlap with payment from the secondary policy they had from the previous job. So again, just thinking about what your options are, talk to a professional. It's definitely beneficial. So then once you decide, you do all the pre-planning, you decide what mechanisms you're going to use to actually execute the leave and to get paid, then you want to start gathering your personal documentation. So this is before there's any paperwork submitted, right? Because you're kind of getting yourself prepared to do all of those things. Before diving into paperwork, you really want to collect and organize prior medical records. Any if you have requested an accommodation, any accommodation emails, um, HR policies. And I encourage people, because we're very used to in this era of like everything's on the cloud, going and looking it up and logging in, download the policies, download the emails. I had a very negative experience around taking medical leave and being discriminated against because I was on medical leave, and I lost access to a lot of stuff. So I really encourage people to like go in and download this stuff so you have all the information before you even fill out the paperwork, because things are moving very quickly after you fill out the actual leave paperwork. If you log in for your insurance, to see what those, again, get those logins in one place. I have a client, they don't ever log into their benefits, platform. And so they're like, I don't re-logging in 3 times to reset my password. It is going to be more stressful down the line. Just get all of it in a single place. Write it down if you have to, get a password manager, whatever the thing is, but get all this stuff in order. And then also key contacts. So you're not scrambling to figure out who's the person to contact for this, because oftentimes things like ADA accommodations or even leave specifically are handled through very specific people in your company. They don't let everyone in HR handle them. So you need to know, who is that person? How do I contact them on phone and email? Similarly, with the insurance company, who, sometimes they assign like case managers. What is the process going to be like, and who are the key contacts? Do you have to contact a certain department related to this, right? Because oftentimes the insurance company is larger, but they have a very specific department that deals with leave. So really gathering all of that documentation. And then fifth, finally requesting and submitting that official paperwork, right? So getting the correct leave paperwork for the right mechanism that you're using, getting it from HR or from whatever provider you're using for the insurance to kind of get things kicked off. Have your doctor completing the medical certification form and submitting everything by the stated deadlines. They do have like regulations around, they would like you submitted like 10 days in advance or 30 days. It really depends on which mechanism you're using. But there is usually a clause for that's not always possible and just as soon as possible after you're having this medical issue, you know that it's going to prevent you from going to work. So just being really cognizant of those things. Number 6 is really around you've submitted the paperwork, what comes next because it gets to be a whirlwind. So, especially if it's a short amount of time for you notifying and you actually being off work. So, you want to really communicate and prepare for time away, notifying your supervisor, preparing like handoff documentation that says who's going to be the point of contact for different projects, what's the status of those things, setting up your out of office message, your calendar to decline meetings, things like that. Really helps reduce distractions and confusion during leave, getting those things in order. And then finally, confirming the details. So you want to make sure you get the like approval, if like this has been submitted, everything's gone through, it's documented. We have the same dates that we put on the paperwork we requested as what's been approved. You understand the pay mechanism. You understand your benefits are going to continue. It's a big part of it. Your medical benefits usually continue through leave. So just making sure you have all of that in order. And then finally, just the ongoing tracking of progress and staying organized. There will be correspondence from insurance companies if you do have that pay mechanism. So monitoring your claim status, they'll ask you to follow up. Some insurance companies that have short-term disability policies ask you to submit, medical documentation saying, I'm still under care, I've been to the doctor as a part of the process. So really just making sure that you stay organized as you go through it. Because living on leave can take an emotional toll, right? So there's a lot of upfront and kind of ongoing cost of emotional toll with the mental load that comes with the large amounts of paperwork and sometimes the unpredictable pace and people asking you for different documents. There can be logistical friction and delays. And so this is where that pre-planning and just having the mental health care in place are key. Second, managing money is different, right? So if you're seeing 60 to 80% of your income and you're navigating a different pay schedule for payments from a short-term disability insurance or from the state, it could be stressful or inconsistent. You might have to change some of your bill due dates. So this is where financial planning is essential. And again, can't speak highly enough of working with a financial planner. And then finally, when it's possibly all over, just deciding if you're going to need to convert from short term to long term. So this is where you want to start early, communicate and prepare for more paperwork if that is a decision that you decide on in the future. So what happens after the leave is over, it's kind of dwindling down. Like I mentioned, you could extend if you need more time off, and that's what's required for your care. So there is a possibility to convert from short term to long term if you have those options available to you. But then after that, it's really like return, resign, or redefine, right? So either you go back to work, renewed focus, and renewed health. You can choose to leave your job. So this is where I say if your health is being impacted by your work, it might be time to leave that job, and medical leave provides you the space to not only heal, but make that plan to exit as well, which is going to be part of your ongoing care. So you might quit. And then fourth option is really just to redefine your work life and your regular life too, to kind of prevent in the future. So that's typically what I say you could do afterwards. I don't know if there's any more questions. I only have a couple minutes left. Are there any other questions in the chat?
Like, do we have any advice for extending short-term leave to long-term leave?
Yeah, I would say that. So one client that I would say what I said before, I would just repeat it, which is like communicate early, right? So if you can. So, you've been on leave for leading up to 3 months, so like getting close to 3 months, you're going to the doctor. Here's a real example. I had a client who they initially requested the 3 months off. Then we got where they had about 1 month left. And a part of ongoing treatment is like you're going to the doctor. They're saying, take this medication. Let's see how it goes. Do this thing. Let's see how it goes. So their treatment had to be changed maybe like a month and a half in or a month in. And it takes time for the medication to see if it's actually working, right? So if we look and say you have 4 weeks left and you just start this medication 3 weeks ago, and it could take up to 4 months to see the full effect, it's probably not a good idea for you to go back to work. right? Because you don't have to like go and then come back and re-request, because there are limitations on leave. So I recommended for that person, okay, you have 4 weeks left. We already know these things that, it takes time for it to see if it's going to take into effect. So let's send you back to the doctor, tell them you don't want to have to go back into work and then get sick again. So if they'll fill out paperwork to extend the leave, they're like, no problem. Right. So 4 weeks, 3 weeks before the leave is ending, actually, again, learning in advance, hopefully, from that prior research, what the policies are around long term and converting to long term for your insurance and your job, so that when the time comes, you'll know exactly what you need to do, right? Because it does vary, but it's often another form that's different. But it also requires a doctor's note, and if it's the insurance, they'll ask you to submit it with all the medical history. If it's your company, they'll have their own requirements. Any other questions, comments, queries? This is my email. If folks want to contact me, please feel free to reach out. Get back to you. I really appreciate everyone's time today. And again, Zenith, for creating this space to talk about these important topics that impact our money and when you least expect it, right? Or you don't really need it to be impacting your money. So that was a great pairing. Your hand. There's a comment in the chat if you want to just come off of mute.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Do you know if a toxic work environment that's causing you anxiety and depression can be considered a workers' comp?
About workers' comp, that's not a specialty that I have. I would say to talk to a workers' comp lawyer. But I usually understand workers' comp around like an injury. I don't know if it extends to mental health injury. That's a great question. But it definitely qualifies as a medical issue,
Okay.
right? So it's definitely something you can go on medical leave for.
Okay, thank you.
And I suppose what I've seen with the workers' comp is it's harder to justify the mental health aspect and tie it to your job as if you had a slip and fall in the workplace and that was a work.
Hmm.
So it's a matter of tying something specific to work to the mental health, which may be harder to prove. I believe that is it. So we will end the presentation. Thank you so much, everyone, for your engaging questions, comments, stories. We really appreciate it and hope this was insightful and that you all have the confidence to go out and take control of your specific situations. If you do or do not have it coming up, or even can share this with other people in your network to encourage them if you see any signs or symptoms or they complain about work or burnout, because we have one life, one body, so we have to make sure that we're taking care of it. Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.